This is Kerbal Space Program Hardcore. That means you can't load saves, you can't cancel a flight, and a lost crew never returns. And this is Bob. He's a Kerbal, and his dream is to visit every planet in the local solar system. He's the one who will push the technological development forward and test the rockets. This means he really loves his planet, but it also means he isn't very smart. So Bob will have only one chance to reach his goal. As the director of the space station, I will be in charge of everything here. And how should I say this? I have absolutely no idea how to build rockets at all, especially how to fly anywhere. I built my first rocket out of the only parts I had available. It looked like it was held together with duct tape and press, and named it Catapult MK1 because its only purpose was to be catapulted upward and fall back down. Bob was incredibly excited to sit in the pilot's cabin for the first time. He couldn't wait for the first launch to happen and for his name to go into history. His first launch was a success for exactly 2 seconds. Then the rocket started spinning wildly and nearly crashed. It's a good thing we didn't forget to give him a parachute. But I managed to collect just a little data for science, which is important for discovering better rocket parts. Bob said that his altitude wasn't enough for him. He wants to go even higher. Next, he will try to collect data from the upper layers of the atmosphere. The main thing is not to overdo it and send Bob into open space. The MK2 catapult was ready and sent to the launch zone, and surprisingly, the launch was very successful. We managed to climb quite high, but to be honest, I was really worried that Bob might fly beyond the planet. After the first engines filtered the rocket upward, Bob fired the second one to climb just a little higher and tried to gather the science that was so much needed. But the fuel only lasted for a few seconds, after which Bob was able to observe Kerbin from the highest point any Kerbal had ever seen. He was excited. Bob successfully landed back on the planet. Every Kerbal is proud of him, and Bob became a star. I don't know yet how or even if I can launch a rocket higher. I suspect the research department needs more science so I can build even better rockets. To achieve this, I threw some thermometers on it and called it Catapult MK3. I sent it up to measure the temperature, hoping that this would help us gain some science. This is already the third launch in a row, another success, with temperature data collected. And Bob never gets tired of this kind of fun. For him, it's like riding a roller coaster, a true professional. Bob managed to collect data from an incredibly high altitude. He broke his own record once again, reaching 41,000 meters. He experienced weightlessness firsthand and had a great time in his cabin. The spaceship was falling so fast that I started worrying whether the parachute would be able to stop it, whether Bob might crash during this flight, or whether this would be his last flight. But luckily, the 4 parachutes were enough. The next step in the development of space engineering is to go beyond Kerbin's atmosphere, something Bob really wanted, but I was really afraid of. There are 3 dangers right there. The rocket has to be powerful enough and a lot can go wrong. We need to make sure we don't fly too far or Bob won't be able to come back. Plus, the re-entry speed could be very high, so we need protection against overheat. Luckily, I just invented a heat shield, so I will use it. I built the MK4 catapult. I hope this is the last one, and from now on I will be launching into orbit. The launch went quite smoothly. I tried to measure everything I could along the way. With surgical precision, I fired the engine to accelerate and then shut it off to maintain control. Bob left the Kerbin atmosphere. This is a huge success. We took a lot of measurements, and all that's left is to return safely. I used the remaining fuel to slow down the speed that had resulted from the fall from 70,000 meters. After that, I dropped the unnecessary module and deployed the parachutes. And at a safe speed, Bob landed successfully. The joy in his eyes knew no bounds. He even decided to finally climb out of the cabin and go for a swim. They could have told him during training just how dangerous it was and that he shouldn't do it, but nobody ever trained anyone. Bob was so pleased with this flight that he immediately asked for another one, and for us, this is a good opportunity to gain more science before attempting to enter orbit. Now Bob is facing a new incredible challenge, reaching orbit. I have to say that this task is difficult for both him and me, because we have to get the spacecraft there and do it without putting Bob at risk. I still don't know exactly how this is supposed to happen. So this is the strange rocket I ended up with. I named it Shoot for the Moon, MK1. I will try to launch it and see if there are any problems. There could potentially be a lot of them. The rocket took off pretty well right away, even though it leaned to one side a bit, but overall I don't think it's a problem. I would have needed to adjust the course slightly anyway, just not as quickly. And the first unexpected major problem was that when they detached, the booster module simply crashed into the main rocket and ripped the main engine right off. And just like that, the most advanced rocket on all Kerbin became a piece of uncontrollable space junk. There was nothing left to do but return to Kerbin, and Bob is very glad that he survived survived this incident. I lowered the booster rockets a bit, maybe that way they won't tear off the engine, rename it MK2, and repainted the ship a little. Bob will be happy. He launched it again on a test flight. Noticed that another pilot, Jebediah, had snuck into the brand new gold-plated rocket. He is Bob's worst rival and wanted to steal all the glory from Bob, but security spotted him in time and stopped the crime. I hope he doesn't sneak onto the ship again. This time Bob got into the rocket and prepared for takeoff. The launch was roughly the same as last time, but when it came to touching the booster rockets, this time it went much more smoothly. They still collided with each other but didn't hit the main module, and the attempt to reach orbit continued successfully. Bob leaned the rocket. During the maneuvers, it wobbled like jelly. As I was going, I just wanted to stop, look around, and see how beautiful it was here. Bob will never get tired of these space flights, but there's no time to waste. I have to keep moving forward. At that point, I wasn't sure if I'd have enough fuel to actually reach orbit and come back, because it became clear that there definitely wouldn't be enough fuel to reach the moon. I tried to perform maneuver to figure out how it worked, but I accidentally pressed the space bar, causing my rocket to detach from the cabin with Bob inside. Because of this mistake, Bob was very upset. He couldn't continue the experiment, and all that was left was to fall back from an altitude of 115 kilometers. At a speed of 2000 meters per second, Bob began entering the atmosphere. I was really scared for him. Every time I worry whether everything will be okay, whether the heat shield will hold up, and whether the speed will be slowed down. But the landing was successful. Bob even stepped out a little bit to smell the flowers on the other side of the planet. One thing was clear: we didn't have enough power, so it was decided to add more rockets. You can never have too many rockets, right? Honestly, the build looked really shoddy and unreliable, but Bob wanted a lot of rockets, and I didn't have any other ideas or better technology, so I agreed. With that much power, the station lit up as it were daytime, and even at that power, the rocket barely managed to take off. Once it reached a certain height, it started swaying too much, dancing around. It became clear we wouldn't get anywhere, but I was afraid to let them go, so that they wouldn't shoot ahead and crash into Bob. When the time came, they broke anyway, on their own. Fortunately, Bob survived, but that was just a stroke of luck. We were extremely lucky. We decided to remove a stack of rockets for stability. The launch went smoothly, but it's unclear whether we will have enough fuel to even reach orbit, let alone fly to the moon. The booster stages also separated quite nicely and flew off in different directions. I continued the ascent and tried to perform the maneuver again. I still don't understand how to do it properly, but it turned out somewhat like that. I opened the throttle, almost used up all my fuel, but I managed. We did it. Bob is incredibly happy. The first Kerbal to reach his home planet's orbit. But unfortunately, as always, I messed up. I set the time acceleration too high, and half a second later, I saw my entire ship on fire. I was terrified, and Bob was even more so. It was a disaster. I quickly dropped the extra model to protect the cabin with a heat shield. We were falling at record speed, and everything was burning. Because of extremely high speed, it felt like we were flying horizontally. Well, actually, that's exactly what's happening. But our speed is decreasing due to the atmosphere, so we will soon crash into the planet. Bob sure is lucky. He survived again, what probably no one else could have survived. He's a hero. Look now how happy he is. Meanwhile, we got enough science for new engine. Maybe thanks to it, we will finally make it to the moon. So I consider the experiment to put Kerbal into orbit a success, and I'm moving on to the next stage, entering lunar orbit. I'm currently testing the new opened engine, and I also decided to hide the scientific stuff in a compartment, so they don't get destroyed by the heat, just in case. Well then, the new rocket is ready. This one's definitely going to make it to the moon. Let's go. The launch went smoothly, but the rocket wasn't very stable. It was swaying quite a bit, so that clearly needs to be fixed somehow. Then something completely unexpected happened. Bob decided to do a backflip on the rocket during takeoff. Now that's a true mastery of rocket control. The process of reaching orbit went pretty well. It spun out of control from time to time, but I dropped the booster rockets when the fuel ran out and continued on my new engine. I hope there's enough fuel left. Then I realized that I accidentally burned all the fuel on this rocket. It seems the engines on the side of it used up its fuel. How could I not have thought of that? Oh well, let's land back down. The new version is ready. I moved the extra rockets to the bottom. I hope that will stop it from wobbling. I also removed the side engines that were guzzling all the fuel, but it didn't help, and it started wobbling really weirdly again. Well, long story short, it didn't end well, except that Bob survived, so everything is great here. Bob himself was even happy with the swinging, since it reminded him of his childhood. I tried changing the location of extra rockets again so that all engines would be in straight line. During takeoff, I saw that beautiful moon. Soon, very soon, Bob will conquer it. And then the worst thing imaginable happened. At an enormous altitude, I pressed the wrong button. Instead of climbing into the cockpit, I ejected Bob at such high speed that he couldn't hold on to the handles and was thrown out. And there he was, Bob, at an altitude of 76 kilometers, beginning to fall back toward the ground. He realized it was a mistake. He knew this was the last time in his life he'd see Caribbean. This is the end of his journey, his story. But he's proud. He understands that all the knowledge he gained through his effort will be put to use in the future. He told the control center that climbing out of the cockpit during takeoff isn't a good idea. Bob had plenty of time to think as he fell from such a high, and one truly clever idea came to mind: to try to deploy his parachute. Honestly, the odds weren't great, but as we already know, Bob is incredibly lucky. And that saved his life. His parachute opened. Bob managed to land safely near a city on the other side of Caribbean. Bob was overjoyed, even with his injured leg, but it was the most epic trick imaginable. After a stunt like that, Bob deserves a glass of champagne, and so do I actually. It was an amazing test. We went from the catapult launch to entering orbit, and even aimed for the moon. And most importantly, Bob survived. Give this a like if you enjoyed, leave a comment letting me know if I should make a next part, where I will continue to explore space, starting with the moon landing.